Okay, everyone, welcome to the Thursday night shir. Tonight we're going to learn short discourse this is of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is said in 1960 on Shabbos Parshas Ekev. That would be in 2 weeks. Shabbos is related to the Parsha of 2 weeks from now, on the 20th day of the month of Av. This is the Rebbe's father's yahrzeit. This mimer is related to the holiday of the 15th of Av. As we learned last night, for those who listened to the talk regarding Shabbos Tisha B'Av, the Dvar Malchus shir, we made mention that the 15th of Av is a big yontiv, but it really grows out of Tisha B'Av. It's really the pneumius of what Tisha B'Av is all about. Tisha B'Av is a fall, which leads to a great elevation. And the elevation is the 15th of Av. That's the significance of that holiday. So therefore, even though we're still in the beginning of the 9 days, we can already leap to the 15th of Av, because especially in a year like this, that we're already peeling away the exile, we're peeling away the klipa, and we're exposing the inner light. Let's immediately connect to the 15th of Av. Now this is going to be strongly connected to the shir I began last week, which I gave 2 classes on, and I still owe you the third, in explaining the idea of the eternity of the third Beis Hamikdash. We spoke about that Dafka, the third Beis Hamikdash, is the deepest level of eternity. This same theme that Rebbe is discussing over here, I will continue that b'li neder. As of now, the plan is to do that for Monday night next week. This week, I went out of town Sunday and Monday. So Monday I didn't give the shir, and I was exhausted on Tuesday, and I didn't do it on Tuesday. Then it was Wednesday I gave already the Dvar Malchus shir, so we were absent on that. So let's do this mimer. It's short. It probably won't take us more than an hour. And it's a Geshmaka mimer and easy to follow. So let's go. The mimer begins on the words like Yisroel kechamisha asa ba'av k'yom kippurim. The Jewish people didn't have any holidays as great as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. And that means that the 2 greatest celebrations that the Jewish people had, at least in the time of the temple, was on Yom Kippur. Even though Yom Kippur is a seemingly more of a somber day, but it was then a very festive day, as the Gemara describes, and I mentioned it yesterday, that the unmarried women, the girls, would go out to dance in the vineyards, and those who needed to find their shidduchim, their soulmates, would go out to the vineyards, and they would meet up and they would make shidduchim. And the same is also the 15th of Av. They would do it in these 2 days. And the Gemara gives a bunch of reasons why the 15th of Av is a holiday. Amongst them, one of them I mentioned last night. That's when they discovered that the decree that was decreed upon those who were going to die in the Midbar were going to stop dying. All those who died for the 40 years. So that's when the last year, we found on the 15th of Av, they finally realized that the decree was done with. And the Gemara also says that they allowed the tribes to intermarry with each other. There's a certain point that the Beis Din handed down that decision. It was on the 15th of Av, because there were certain restrictions regarding people marrying into other tribes. The tribes stuck to themselves because of the stories of the daughters of Tzalafcha who complained that they don't have, who received an inheritance, and then the family of Menashe said that if the girls will inherit land that belongs to Menashe, but they'll get married to men from other tribes, and their children, their boys, their male inheritors will then belong to the other tribe, and that means that would uproot certain parts of the land and take it to the other tribe. So Moshe Rabbeinu gives them the mitzvah of a commandment of God, stated last week in the end of the parsha, that girls, at least those who are going to inherit, means families that only have daughters, that don't have boys, those girls can only marry within the same tribe. What that was doing was creating a certain sense of tribalism amongst the Jewish people and taking away from the unity. Even though I guess it only impacted these women, but still it was that kind of a feeling. At a certain point later, many years later, the Sanhedrin sat down and they came up with the psak, the halacha, that commandment of God was only for the first generation that settled the land. that in the initial settling, there has to be a distinction very strongly of each tribe. But at a later point, they can annul that. That was another reason. And the Talmud says that they permitted the tribe of Binyamin, they allowed Binyamin back amongst the Jewish people, because for a while, the whole tribe of Binyamin, because of the story of the concubine in Giva, in which the family, the tribe of Binyamin, some thugs and the tribe of Binyamin acted in a very despicable manner in which the Jewish people had to go to war against Binyamin. And in the end, the Beis Din decided to allow, and for many years they excommunicated the entire tribe. Now they allowed Binyamin to rejoin the Jewish people, so to speak, again. So these are various different reasons. They also stopped chopping the wood for the Karbanos. The Gemara gives like 7 reasons. Now that's Talmudic reasons. In Kabbalah and in Chassidus, in the writings of the Ari, it says that the reason for the holiday is because you have a full moon. It says in the writings of Arizal, which is Pri Etz Chaim, which, by the way, this week is going to come the Arizal's yard site. So it's good we're learning a mimer. When is the Arizal's yard site? I think on Sunday. Hey of. The Arizal's yard site is on Sunday. So let this be in us connecting to the Holy Ari. So and this teaching of the Arizal is brought in Chassidus. The quality of the day of the 15th of Av is that's the day when the moon is full. And in the words of the Zohar, Kaima Sihara Bishlemusa, the Gemara refers to it as Kaima Sihara Bishlemusa, that the moon is in its fullest. The Tzarech Lav, we need to understand that there's a full moon. So then the question is, but that's not only in the 15th of Av. I touched upon this question yesterday. We need to understand that this idea that the moon is in its fullest, a full moon, this we have in the 15th of every month. And what makes the 15th of Av different and unique? We have this every holiday, every 15th. 15th of Shvat is also, okay, that's we have Tu B'Shvat. The 15th of Adar, well, it's also a holiday, it's Shushan Purim. The 15th of Cheshvan, right? It's not a holiday. So why do we say that V'oitzais, and even more than this, what does it say over here? That this Yom Tov is greater than all the other holidays, including the holidays that are on the 15th. Pesach is on the 15th, Sukkot is on the 15th. V'oitzais, the Gama Yom Tov, the Pesach, the Sukkot, Gam Hem B'Tezvav V'chodesh. They too are on the 15th of the month. The Imkain, and if so, why is the 15th of Av greater than the Yom Tov of Pesach and Sukkot, which are also on the 15th when you have a full moon? Now, what's so great that we have a full moon? We'll explain in the Maayon. The moon represents the Jewish people. It represents the attribute of Malchus, the Shekhinah, which is the sole source of Israel. So when the moon is full, meaning the Jewish people are standing on a very high caliber and a very high state of proximity to God. We're the beneficiaries of great divine illumination. Yeah, but that happens every 15th of the month. What's the idea of Dafka the 15th of Av? Acha Amar is until the sages come along and they say, there wasn't a Yom Tov for the Jewish people like the 15th of Av. So what's the main explanation in this? That the elevation that happens on the 15th of Av, we have that elevation all the time, but this time it follows a very, very great descent, a plunging descent. There are the waning of the moon represents always the ups and downs, or let's say the downs of life, the hardships, and generally what's called Hester Panim, when God is concealing himself from us and we're in the darkness. And that's the exile. And since the story of the Jewish people is a constant fluctuation of times when Hashem is close to us, and we have a very shaky marriage with God. It's close and distance, close and distance. So every month we have that idea, the reconciliation, the reunification. And it's reflected in a marriage, also in a husband and wife. There's the separation, at a certain part of the month, and then there's the unity that happens at another point in the month. So that's the idea. But what he's emphasizing, what he says is that the exile that's represented, or the down that's represented in all the other months, is a down, but not such a big down. But in the month of Av, it comes after Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is utter destruction and devastation. In other words, we've hit rock bottom. And since we hit rock bottom on Tisha B'Av, then what happens after Tisha B'Av, because that's the rule. In God's reality, which God is the essence of goodness, every descent and every pain and every darkness is only for the sake of an ascent and a greater revelation and a deeper intimacy. So therefore, Aliyah, the kind of it comes after the fall of the ninth of Av. And that makes that the elevation on the 15th, even though it's the same idea, the moon is full, that means we are in full recipiency of Hashem's light, but yet on the 15th of Av, it is greater than all the other. Not only that we appreciate it because we were in a darker place, but it's actually a brighter, greater light. And according to the rule, the that the descent is for the sake of an ascent, moving. It's understood. As much as the descent is, so the ascent that comes after it, and as a consequence of it, which is because the elevation is derived from the descent, and even deeper than that, the initial descent was only to prepare for the ascent, or to gain momentum, like a person crouching in order that they should be able to jump and leap forward. So the crouch itself is part of the ascent, as explained so many times by the Rebbe. So if it's a lower, the more preparation the person is doing in the crouching, the greater. You watch ever a lion, a hunting lion, a puma, hunting for an animal as it lays and it crouches down. So the lower it crouches, that the leap that it's going to pounce is going to be with greater vigor and for a greater distance. So the same is the idea. The lower we fall, the higher we go. With this makes the 15th of Av so great. Because in this day, the ascent, when the moon is in its fullest, is very high. Because it comes after and through the descent that came before that, which is very great. Okay, that's it. And the explanation of the matter is as follows. The moon is referring to the attribute of kingship, Malchus, which the attribute of kingship, it refers to many things. It refers to the attribute of kingship, which is God's presence in the world. It refers to what we refer to as Shekhinah, and it refers to the ensemble of Jewish souls, because we're all really derivatives of the Shekhinah. And we know that we're compared to the moon, the Shekhinah, the Jewish people, the divine energy, the godly soul of creation, because it's a recipient, it's a makabel, it's feminine. It receives its light from above, from higher, from the transcendental element of the divine, called HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the husband, who bestows his influence to her, to the Shekhinah. So, and the comparison is as follows: the Kashem Shesiyat Alavana, just like the moon, Les Lamagar Meklum, has nothing of her own. She'eino Oid Haba Mimena Elo Oid Hashemesh. The light that is projected from the moon is just a reflection of sunlight. There's no light. The moon is not projecting its own rays, its own illumination. It's bouncing off the rays of the sun. Meir Al Yada, that is shining through it. Kachkam Sfiras HaMalchus, so too is with Sfiras HaMalchus. Les Lamagar Meklum, she's a makabel, and she's a luminous entity. She gives life to all of creation, or the Jewish people influence and give light to the world. But our light is not our light. Our light comes from the Torah. Our light comes from intrinsic light that is being continuously funneled through our souls, but not from us. It's Hashem's light. Like we say, Hashem Oiri, Hashem is my light. And our job is to shine the light that God is shining upon us and reflect it into every spot that we find ourselves in this world. A Jew is here to raise the consciousness and awareness of the world, to raise the morality, to raise the awareness of God in the world. And that's, but it's not our light, it's not our teachings, it's all transmitted from above. We're just reflecting it, each and every one of us in different places and so on and so forth. Like the moon that's reflecting the rays of the sun in the nighttime to places where the sun itself is not reaching the night, during the night. And the kach comes Firis HaMalchus, so to the attribute of Malchus, less than Magar Maklum, doesn't have anything of her own. Now the explanation of the matter is that the Rebbe is making over here a very important clarification. That this that we say that Malchus doesn't have any light doesn't mean she doesn't have any light. It means she doesn't have any shining light. She has light. And in a sense, her light is the deepest, highest light. It's really rooted in the essence of God, higher than all the others' attributes. And in that sense, she's not a recipient. She doesn't receive from anybody. However, that's a very private, innate, deep, inner light that is not shareable, at least not now, until the days of Mashiach. The light that is shared by Malchus, shining light that she can project out into the dark, into those that need that light, for Malchus it means into the creation, to enliven them, to sustain them. That light she doesn't have on her own. That she's only reflecting from the sun. It's not that Malchus doesn't have any light at all. The intention is the woman has a very deep light. In a sense, the feminine light is much higher than the masculine light at its core, at its essence. It's just very private, and it hasn't been shared yet. That's what's so beautiful about Mashiach's world. The true, innate, feminine, intrinsic inner light is going to come forth, and it's going to be the ultimate light. But that's for the future. When I say future, I mean already current, because we're already in the future. But I mean to say, relative to the entire passage of history, the way the moon was influencing, or the woman was influencing her home, and so on and so forth, is mainly a transmission of light and energy and so forth that she's receiving from the mashpia. She has a light that is essential light, that is not luminous. That's why we say that Malchus was initially emanated as a point. That point, that's her essential light. All the other spheres, when they were initially emerged, they emerged as an entire configuration. The configuration represents all their features. Their features are all their illuminations. So Chesed comes with the Chesed of Chesed and the Gevura of Chesed and the Teferes of Chesed, which are all the characteristics which allow for Chesed to influence. And the same as Gevura and same the others. Malchus is not that way. She was initially born just with a point. And then later, she has to grow by receiving the other elements of Malchus, which Malchus is also a configuration, where she receives the other attributes, but that is being given to her, unlike the other spheros that have that naturally. That which she receives, that's what's being shared. Now there's two opinions in Kabbalah. What do we say is the essential point of Malchus? Im Keser Sheba Malchus. If her essential core is the Keter element, the crown element of Malchus, by Malchus Sheba Malchus, or it's the Malchus of Malchus. In other words, what's her essence? Is her essence the Keser element of Malchus, and the rest is built on that Keser Sheba Malchus? Or is her essence Malchus Sheba Malchus, and everything and all the other spheres are additives to her? But the Rebbe over here is interesting, is not going into the explanation and the difference of what it is, if it's Keser Sheba Malchus or Malchus Sheba Malchus. It is explained in other places in Chassidus what that means, but that's not, he doesn't explain it over here. But the light that illuminates and does reveal itself to others, that she doesn't have any of her own. In order that she should be she should have luminous light that is shareable light that is emanating. On that we say she doesn't have anything of her own. So this comes to her through drawing the other attributes, through the yichud. That's what she receives from her husband. He, which represents all the other attributes, is shining upon her of his light like the sun shines upon the moon, in which the moon reflects. And the ultimate of this light that she's, in terms of a makabel that she's receiving, this reaches its peak every month on the 15th of the month. Then Malchus, as a makabel, as a recipient, is in her full capacity of recipients. She's completely open and fully receiving the hashpah from her husband, which means the transcendental, infinite light of God that far surpasses creation. And he channels to Malchus, Malchus receives, and Malchus therefore becomes the power of the divine, the immanent element of God within the world, which includes also the Jewish people. And this is what it says in the pasuk. Now this idea is all described in a pasuk, the mystical meaning of a pasuk in Koheles. In Koheles it says like this: the Yisroel in Eretz Bakoili, that the advantage of earth is in everything. Simply, earth has an advantage in all matters. Earth, soil. And how much so is the earth so special that Melech l'sada nevad, that even the king is subjugated to the earth. Because for the king to eat, the king is the highest from all, right? From anything that exists, is what the highest creatures or beings are human beings. In the human beings itself, the king is like, there's a hierarchy, all kinds of people and different positions and so on and so forth. The king is the highest. Even the king is subjugated to the earth, because the king can only, for his morning breakfast, he needs, for his very life, he needs to come onto the earth. He needs to eat his cereal or his salad or whatever it is he's getting from the vegetables, from the wheat, from the flour, from all that he's getting from the earth. That's the simple meaning. But then there's a deeper spiritual meaning to this pasuk. And it means like this: Malchus is called earth. Just like I said before, that Malchus is feminine and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is masculine. So we see that exists in all elements. All of creation is created in pairs. Heaven and earth. Heaven is masculine, is male, because the heaven is the mashpia. It gives the shamayim and the aretz, the heaven and the earth are really married. The sky and the earth. The sky is the husband. That's why he's the one that gives the rain. And the earth absorbs that. It's like the woman is absorbing the hashpah from the husband. But who's the one who has the babies? The woman. So the woman now the earth takes that and produces all the vegetation. And so that's that relation. So Malchus is called earth because of that. You see that quality. It's the last of all the attributes, just like the earth is the last and lowest form of existence. So in the levels of divine, it's the lowest and last. And for other elements, that Malchus is called earth. It's saying that Malchus, the Yisroel Eretz. How does Malchus Eretz get Yeser? Yeser means more. In other words, she has what she has on her own. How does she increase? Just like we said before, Malchus she's very limited. What she has of her own is very deep and unshareable. What she's going to share and influence, she needs to receive. And how does she receive it? From her husband. So that's what the pasuk is saying. The Yisroel Eretz, the Yisroel, the Yeser, the additives, the additions to earth, to Malchus, Bakoilhi is coming from her husband. Her husband is called Bako, because from the husband is called Ze'er Anpin, the sixth, which Ze'er Anpin means another Kabbalistic term for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which represents the higher sphirot, the higher attributes, which all those higher attributes funnel down into the Yesod, and Yesod is the last and final element of the masculine sphirot, And the whole idea of Yesod is the bonding with Malchus. Yesod is the power of bonding, of connection. So it's the ability for the man to bond and to transmit to the woman. So, and that's why it's called Bakol, because Yesod is called Kol, because it receives everything. It receives from all the higher spheres. Chesed flows into Yesod, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Hod, all the 5 spheres, and even also the intellect, the Chachma, the Chachma Bina Das, they all flow into Yesod, and Yesod is given to Malchus. So that, and Yesod is called therefore Bakol, like we say in davening, L'cha Hashem Hagedula, which is Chesed, Hagevura, which is Gevura, Teferes, V'Netzach V'Hod. Then we say L'cha Hashem Hamamlocha. The only one that we don't make mention of, which is kingship, the only one that we don't make mention is Yesod. What happens to Yesod? Yesod is the word Ki Kol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz. Kol that connects Shamayim and Oretz. Shamayim is the male, Oretz is the female. The one that's connecting it is Kol. So Kol is Yesod. So that's what the verse is saying. Shlomo HaMelech is saying in Kehelis. Yisroel Eretz, the quality of Malchus, Bakoili is through Bakoil, is through Yesod that has Koil. Yisron Shanasa, the Spheres of Malchus, the addition that happens in Malchus, who al Yadei Bakoil, is through her husband, through Bakoil. Spheres HaYesod, it's the attribute of Yesod. Sha'al Yadei HaYesod, through the Yesod, Nimshachim, the Spheres of Malchus, it's drawn into Malchus from all the higher spheres, including and primary from what the male element receives even from higher, and that's from Bina, the illumination from Bina, which in Bina, through Chachma, comes the Or Ein Sof, comes the infinite light. It's transmitted to Chachma, from Chachma to Bina. Bina is the mother. She gives it to her son. The son is considered the masculine, the 6 male sphirot, which form one unit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he, through Yesod, is Mashpia to Malchus. Kol, the word Kol, which means everything, in Gematria, it's 50. And we know the influence of Bina is through 50 gates, called 50 gates of Bina. So Yesod, which is called Kol, because it's at the bottom, is receiving from all the higher spheres, funneling the influence that comes from the 50 gates of Bina, which is also called Kol. So 2 things are called Kol. Yesod is called Kol, and Bina is called Kol, 50, and all that is transmitted to Malchus. The Zahu Bakoil, this is Bakoil. Kol Gamat Bigamatri Yanun. Kol is Bigamatri Yanun. So this is the ordinary system that Hashem has set it up. This is the order. This is the way, the mechanics. This is the mechanics that God set up when the system is not tampered with, when things are running in accordance to the initial divine plan. This is the way it is. But then Shlomo HaMelech continues in the pasuk and he says, well, there are other possibilities. There are times when Malchus, the woman, is not just a recipient from her husband, but that she rises as a rising star. And she rises higher even than the source that's transmitting to her. That's again related to the future times when it says Nekeva T'Seiviv Gover, that the woman will encompass her husband, will encircle her husband. Now, the thing circling the other means that it's higher than it. It's a keter to it. It's a crown to it. Eishes Chayil, the woman of valor, Ateres Baila. In other words, the ultimate is to unlock the secret of the woman. It's to unlock the feminine potential. And that's very high. So, this itself, that Malchus rises higher than Yesod and higher than all the spheres and higher than Bina, has in itself a few stages. And that's the meaning of the second half of the pasuk. Melech l'sadeh nevad. We said before the pasuk is Yisron Eretz Bakoilu. Malchus increases through Bakoil, through Yesod. That's regularly. Melech l'sadeh nevad is talking about an extreme elevation of Malchus, far beyond that. How is it hinted to in these words, Melech l'sadeh nevad? So he brings these 2 pirushim in the words Melech l'sadeh nevad, Kabbalistic pirush. The king is subjugated to the field. So one pirush is that the king, referred to over here, is Melech Malchei Hamlachim, the king of all kings, which represents the level of Keter, crown. That's called Melech. Because Keser, who wears a Keser? Who wears a crown? A king. So, Keser, which is known as the Soviv Kalam, the infinite light, higher than the attributes that are Oireis Bekelim, lights and vessels. This is still a light that can't be contained in a vessel. The lights of Keser, that's why the crown sits above the head. It's called Melech. And we're saying that even Keter, the crown, even Keser, the crown, L'Sadeh, to the field is Malchus, Nevad is subjugated. What does that mean? That there are times that Malchus rises so high, she rises all the way up into Keser. Actually, we spoke about that yesterday in the Dvar Malchus here, 2 times in a year when that happens, on the 15th of Av, when Malchus has a super Aliyah to the highest, and on Yom Kippur when there's Aliyah Samalchus by Keser, especially in Keser, especially by Ne'ilah. So that's the idea. Melech, which is Keser, L'Sadeh, to the field, which is Malchus, Nevad is subjugated, means that Malchus is then receiving purely, directly from the Or Ein Sof, and not filtered and diminished through the male spheres, as we spoke earlier. That's one pirush. There's another pirush that says that Melech in this pasuk is referring to Malchus herself. She's called Melech because she's the king over the worlds, over the actual creations. L'Sadeh, to the field, she is subjugated. What does that mean? Does that refer that Malchus has a family that she has to take care of? And not only that, sometimes she has to really make herself vulnerable and descend into very dark places in order for her to do the tikkunim, to clean up her own house. Sometimes she has to act as an exterminator to clean out the bad stuff and so on and so forth. So in that sense, she has to go into that's the whole idea of the fall of Malchus. Malchus falls and the descent and Golos HaShechina, the exile of the Shechina, and the exile and all of that. It's because to do tikkunim, to do certain purifications in the darkest of places. Remember always, Kedusha always wins. Malchus is going to come out supreme. The Jewish people are going to rise. It's always going to come out that holiness is going to prevail. But sometimes it appears like the other side is winning the battle, and that Malchus and the powers of holiness are subjugated and taken advantage of by the other side. That's the other meaning. Melech, the king, L'Sadeh. In this case, the field is not Malchus. The field represents the unholy field, the field of Klippa, which is in the 3 lower worlds, but primarily it's the Klippas, the unholiness, like it says Esav Ishsa, that he's the man of the field. So this is an unholy place. Malchus is subjugated to that field, never. So what are the connection of the 2 Pirushim? Because in order for Malchus to rise to Keser, that only happens after Malchus has a descent down lower through her descent and through her struggles and through the Golos, as we spoke earlier. Through Tisha B'Av, you come to Tezvav B'Av. Through the fall, you come to the Aliyah. Achlamailam, as it explains over here, it says after this Melech L'Sadeh Nevad, the king is subjugated to the field. This indicates Aliyah miyuchedes b'sfiras HaMalchus. This is indicative of a super elevation to Malchus, not her ordinary monthly joining with her husband, in which her lights are, in which she's illuminated with light. This is a much higher elevation. And in this itself, there's 2 pirushim how that elevation is hinted to in this pasuk. One of them speaks of the elevation itself. The other one speaks of what causes the elevation. Or if I remember, as he's going to say in a moment, that it's possible for Malchus to elevate in Keser, maybe not through a fall, but through the fall, the elevation is even higher than Keser, as we're going to see. So Pirush Echad K'di'isa B'Zohar said in Zohar, the Melech called Melech Ilah. That Melech is referring to the supernal king, as we said before, referring to Keser. The Hainu Sfiras HaKeser, which is the attribute of Keser, Shalom Ayla Mishdalshus, which is beyond the evolving order of worlds. That's why it's called the supernal Keser, the higher crown. Pirush Melech L'Sadeh Nevad, and the Pirush and the meaning of when it says the king is subjugated to the field, represents the idea that at times Malchus is infused with pure infinite light, as we said before, unhindered and not diluted through the other spheres. Shamalchus nikras b'shem sada. In this case, Malchus is called field, like we sometimes say, setei chakal tapuchim kadishin, the field, the apple orchard. Right? So Malchus is called sometimes field. Pirush habeis b'zoyar. And there's a second pirush in Zoyar Sham. The Melech calls Sfiras HaMalchus. That Melech is referring to Malchus. Melech l'sada nevan, and the king subjugated to the field, call Yeridas HaMalchus, is referring to the descent of Malchus. Wa'olam oispiyah, to the three worlds, Bria, Yatzir, and Asiyah. Hanikra b'shem Sada, which is called field. The Is-Sada, the Is-Sada. There is a field and there is a field. Is-Sada, the Kedusha, there is a field of holiness. She is Sfiras HaMalchus. Remember we said before that Malchus is called field. But now in this interpretation, that's holy field. In this interpretation, the second interpretation, the Sada element of the pasuk is not referring to Malchus. It's referred because Melech is referring to Malchus. Remember, it's the king subjugated to the field. The question is, who's the king? If the king is Keser, then the field is Malchus. But if the king is Malchus, then the field is the lower elements, as he explained to begin. The Isada de l'Umazah. There is this, as it says in Zohar, that there's two fields. There is a field of holiness, which is Sfiras HaMalchus. Isada de l'Umazah, and there is the unholy field, the field that belongs to the unholy. Now, the Fi Pirijen, according to this explanation, Sadekan calls Sada de l'Umazah. This field is referring to the field of the unholy. Malchus Yeredes, that Malchus descends, Levared Birudim, to go down to fixings, to purify purifications, Besada de l'Umazah, and the field of the other side. In the Kamaimer, as it says, a pasuk in Mishlei, it says, Raglecha Yeredes Maves, her feet descend into death. So mystically, this is referring to the feet of the Shekhinah, the feet of Malchus, go down into dark places. It means simple that Hashem gives extra energy to the Klippas. Wherever the Jewish people go, the Shekhinah comes along. This is the meaning. She goes down into a place of death. Malchus Yeredes Libiyah, that Malchus goes down to the three lower worlds. But the purpose is like the sages say, why did the Jewish people go to exile? So that we can extract the sparks of holiness that are there. It's only through this descent of the Shekhinah, of Malchus, to do this rectification, these purifications in Biyah. So this descent is for the sake of an ascent. This is what prompts, this is what causes her to go up much higher. Not only the Aliyah that we said before, that she goes up into Keser, but even deeper than that. Even higher than the drawing of Keser. Again, even the drawing of Keser to Malchus, that's also extraordinary. That too is not the normal position of Malchus. That too is a treat. But yet, through the fall, she goes way beyond that. All of this will give us an understanding of the 15th of the month generally, and the uniqueness of the 15th of the month of Av. The Azkai Masiyah Bishla, that's when the moon is standing in its fullest. This quality in the moon, and again, the moon is full, which is a metaphor for the Shekhinah being full. But Tamid is always happens la'achrei ha'yerida shebizman ha'moiled. It's always after the descent that happens in the beginning of the month. What's the descent to the beginning of the month? Is that the moon is lightless, right? It's dark. She has no light. That means that there is a disconnect, which is the idea of exile, a disconnect between us and Hashem. Then the moon has no light to give. She's in darkness. And by the way, this is all not just the story of the Jewish people. It's each and every one of our individual lives. We go through darkness. We go through hardships. And if we stick it out and we don't give up and we keep our faith in the darkness, then we always realize that after every fall, we actually ascend to a much deeper and higher place. That's always the rule. And after the descent of the concealment and the obscurity of the moon at the time of its birth, Aliyah, the kind of Shlomus, comes afterwards the elevation, that she's standing in a very complete place. However, notwithstanding that after the descent, the Aliyah in Malchus is very great, but it's possible that even after the ascent, it should still have changes, it should still fluctuate. Now it seems like what the Rebbe is talking about over here, the elevation of Malchus after her separation, he's talking about the idea of already not the regular idea of darkness and light, but we're talking about extra darkness, which is reflected, in the idea that there was a concealment. But he's not talking about just the idea, the way the structure of Malchus is that Malchus receives from her husband, and there are times when there was a brighter receiving. Including in this is even the specialty, even the special elevations that come after the falls. She can be elevated to a place and have this enormous illumination, but not necessarily that it's retainable. As we're going to see, it's possible for it to change. In other words, it's not nitzchias, it's not eternal. It's not going to be an eternal elevation. And it's possible for it to be afterwards a descent. And then there is an aliyah that's even higher than this. She aliyah nitzchis, which is eternal aliyah. Which can't have a descent. Could be that's referring to the two elements that he spoke earlier. There's an aliyah of Malchus in Keser, which is huge. But even though she's elevating into Keser, or as he called it before, not the elevation of Malchus in Keser, but he called it Hamshachas HaKeser, the drawing of the lights of Keser to Malchus, which is super powerful, but yet not necessarily that it's nitzchias, that it's eternal. And then there is the deeper elevation that comes after the biggest fall. Then her elevation is one that's permanent and will never change. Reuven and what this will understand, the novelty of the 15th of Av, in comparing it to the general fulfillment of the moon that we have usually. In every month, the idea of the aliyah of the moon. Yes, it's always after a descent of the period when there was a moonless sky, when it was dark, representing the concealments and so forth. And therefore the elevation is very high. It's in a manner even at the time of the elevation, and even at the time of the connection, it's leaving room. It's possible. There is already a possibility of a breakup in the relationship, of this not lasting. It's not necessarily absolutely durable that will last forever. Even the 15th of Chodesh Nisan, now every 15th of the month is a special day representing an Aliyah. And within those you have special holidays, like Pesach, 15th of Nisan. But even that, 15th of Nisan, Chag HaPesach, which is the Untitled Chapter, what do you see? What are we celebrating Pesach? Because of the exodus of Egypt. The exodus of Egypt didn't last forever. In some ways, because we will never go back to the slave state that we were before, but the fact that we were able to still go into exile afterwards means that it did not knock a nail in that should last forever. Yetzias Mitzrayim was considered a redemption which it was followed by an exile. And the same is also regarding the full moon so that's the full moon represented on the 15th of Nisan. Then there's another idea in full moon. That when the first Beis HaMikdash was built, we know it was built through Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, and Shlomo HaMelech was the 15th generation from Abraham from Avram. We count Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, whatever, until Moshe Rabbeinu was the 7th, and then you go But on this, actually, now you're not counting through Moshe, you're counting through Yehuda, Peretz, you go down, David HaMelech is the 14th and Shlomo is the 15th. So again, the moon was full. So you had the greatest time for Israel, for the Jewish people. The greatest divine illuminance. Beis HaMikdash. But even that didn't last forever. The Yisroel in Medrash, as it says in Medrash, Shlomo Tezvav L'Avram. Shlomo HaMelech was the 15th generation of Avram, the Azkaim Asiyad B'Shlomus, which reflects in the idea that the moon was then in its fullest. That's why Shlomo HaMelech was the one who built the house. So this Aliyah too ain't Aliyah Nitzchis. This Aliyah is not an eternal Aliyah. Because afterwards the Beis HaMikdash was then destroyed after that. But the Aliyah of the 15th day of the month of Av, since it comes after the descent of Tisha B'Av, which is a very, very great descent, the fall of this Yerida is going to lead, so the elevation is going to be commensurate and equivalent to the descent. And this Aliyah in Sfiras HaMalchus, is an Aliyah that has no Yerida afterwards. Tezvav Ba'av represents the correction of Tisha B'Av. In other words, it's the repair of the destruction of both temples. We're going to see in a moment. And therefore it represents the mystery of the 15th of Av is that it's a future Yom Tov. It's the Yom Tov of the future. It's the Yom Tov of Mashiach. That redemption is going to be permanent. So that's why the 15th of Av, which represents the Aliyah of Malchus, the Aliyah of Malchus in a way that she will never ever part. And that's its ultimate Aliyah. And that's why this is way beyond the 15th of every other month. And that's why the Jewish people already back then knew that there's something about this day that far surpasses any other day of the calendar. Based on this, we'll also understand Gamash. So even though technically in our cycle we have the 15th of Av, and then next year we find ourselves again with Tisha B'Av. Hopefully this year it's done. We're not going to ever find ourselves by Tisha B'Av as a dark day again. Tezvav B'Av is going to be its final tikkun, and we don't even have to wait till then. We can already have it. We're learning already about it today. We can have already that elevation today. Based on this, we'll also understand what it says in the Medrash on the Pasuk. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, be comforted, my people. That the comfort is a double comfort. The reason why Hashem says Nachamu, Nachamu, 2 times Nachamu, is because He's comforting us for the first temple and for the second temple. At first glance, it doesn't seem to make any sense. That if we're already being comforted for the first temple, it includes within it already a comfort for the second temple, because the second temple was a weaker, inferior Beis HaMikdash than the first Beis HaMikdash. So if I'm going to replace, how does a comfort come? A comfort comes by replacing. Once Hashem restores us to the status of the first temple, that means the comfort, we're not lacking anything, inevitably we've already restored the second temple as well, which was of lesser stature. So if someone used to live and used to get a salary of $1,000, and then he was demoted a while later and he got $500, and then they took that away as well. So in the end, someone comes and gives them $1,000, restores them back to their salary of $1,000 a week, whatever. So that already includes the restoration of 500. So you don't need it. It's not a double comfort. It's one comfort. That's the question. The Bayis Rishon and Idol Yisroel and Bayis Sheni. The first temple was a much greater Beis HaMikdash than the second temple. The second Beis HaMikdash was lacking five very special things that indicated the dwelling of the Shekhinah there. So even though the second temple also had the dwelling of the Shekhinah, but it was a lower level Shekhinah, as explained in Tanya. And if so, once we have already the Nachama, the comfort on the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, why do I need an extra Nachama for the second Beis HaMikdash? But the idea will be understood al pi anal. That since the descent is for the sake of an ascent, and after the descent, There's always, the elevation is always greater than what was before. Because whenever we go down, every time we're sliding, it's because we go up and we go to a higher peak. We slide, we go to a higher peak. If that's the case, we have to say that the second Beis HaMikdash was superior to the first Beis HaMikdash because it came after it was destroyed. The mere fact that this came after a fall, which was the destruction of the first temple, you have to say second Beis HaMikdash was higher. So even though on a more revealed and a more experiential way, the first temple was greater than the second, but there was something deeper about the second Beis HaMikdash that was lacking in the first temple. And because of that, we need to be comforted for both, because each one has a quality. But the third temple, since it's going to come after the descent of the second temple, which is after an ascent that comes after the descent of the first temple, its elevation is going to be Ein Sof. And according to Zakarchach Tzarech Loimer, so you are forced to say Sheyesh Maila B'Bayis Sheni Al Bayis Rishon, that there is a superior quality in the second Beis HaMikdash over the first Beis HaMikdash. Mishum Shabinyan Bayis Sheni, just from the mere fact that the building of the second Beis HaMikdash La'achri Churban Bayis Rishon was after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. Haina Aliyah Sha'achrei Hayarida. It was a descent. It was an ascent after a descent. Ukamaylas Bali Tshuva Al Tzadikim, and like the quality of a Bal Tshuva on a tzaddik hasn't fallen. The Bal Tshuva is a tzaddik who fell, and now he's coming back, and we know the Bal Tshuva is higher because there was a Yerida. In order for him to be a Bal Tshuva, he had to fall. And therefore, we have to say that when he's doing tshuva, he's going higher than where he was before. If he's not going higher, why did he have to fall? Everything is ultimately, even though we have free choice, but it's also following a certain guidance from above. And that's where the second Beis HaMikdash was higher. So we need to have a specific nachama, to replace also the second temple. Also on this quality that wasn't the Bayis Sheni. Is the double nachama. After the descent of Tisha B'Av, in the destruction of both Beis HaMikdash, the first and the second, will be in the future. Will be an aliyah in accordance to the Yerid. Now, even just thinking, the Rebbe is not saying it here. All the other exiles, Mitzrayim was 210 years. The Babylonian exile was 70 years. The Greeks, even though it wasn't a complete exile, was, first of all, number one, we stayed in Eretz Yisroel. And it was 100 and something years. I'm not exactly sure, they had 150, 100. So I had a certain measure. This exile seems to be eternal, close to 2,000. And we're scattered all over the world. And we've been through hell of it. And that's because the descent is endless. It's almost like we're plummeting in a bottomless pit, because the elevation is going to be endless, permanent, forever and ever. But you see from here that even though the idea, as we said before, that there's levels, that the main Maila in the third Beis HaMikdash is the idea of its nitzchias. Same idea that we were learning in the other Maila. Haina nitzchias she'ein achrei ha'galus. Aliyah nitzchias is going to be a permanent elevation that doesn't have an exile after. The year ba'aliyah zu beis ha'mailas, and this aliyah, this elevation is going to have both qualities. Hein mailas bayis rishon, it's going to have the quality of the first Beis HaMikdash. Shahaya by oisam hei dvarim shachasru bayis sheni, which had 5 things that were lacking in the second temple. And mailas bayis sheni, and the quality of the second Beis HaMikdash, shehi mailas hatshuva, which is the quality of tshuva. So this is what we're going to have. Merit that all of this should already come to fruition. Now, told you to be short and sweet.